Alrighty, so we are strapping in for another one-shot review. And I haven't made a video in a while, honestly, just because of multiple circumstances. I became busy around the time I said I was going to start making even more videos, and then I just didn't go see movies as much. Literally still paid for the subscription, but haven't had a chance to use it because I've been doing other things. I picked up a second job, actually at a secondhand media store, so I might have like a video about that in the future. And I have plans for, or at least I had plans for setting up like a more, like big sort of easy setup for me where I could have the place that I watch it and the place that I sit being the same thing, so I could just go like boom and start recording the video. But that will have to wait until I have enough money to finish my garage for the most part. So here we are, a couple months removed from my last video. I'm also planning on maybe starting like some sort of more private channel that people would have to pay into, where I just do rant videos and then people would have to pay into it. That's kind of my security of my dumb thoughts being leaked out to everybody who knows me in real life. But regardless, I guess more updates on that soon. But not to make this video too long, so I'm going to go back to what we're supposed to do here and do the movie review. But I've been gone, and maybe I'll make a video explaining why I stopped making videos for a while. It wasn't because I think this isn't a good idea or something like that. It was just simply out of like some mixture of laziness and inconvenience. So, what movie are we reviewing today? The movie that I watched today is actually from the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas, but I had never heard of it before actually finding it in person in this way. So this movie is called THX 1138, and I watched it on Laserdisc. So that's why I have this giant thing here. And if you don't know what Laserdisc is, it's basically like something quality-wise in between a VHS and a DVD back when DVDs did not exist. And if you were a psychopath and you were to buy the most expensive Laserdisc player that was ever made, you could actually watch things in HD before HD, right? They had this whole thing called Muse. Japan really liked Laserdisc. It was like a whole thing. That being said, I watched my Laserdisc off of this Sony one that I got off eBay that plays on both sides, and I'm sure that, especially it being Sony branded and Pioneer being the main sort of Laserdisc company, I'm sure that I'm not getting the best possible performance out of it, but I still felt like it was sufficient for watching this movie. And I believe that either this is the only way to watch this movie, maybe it's on streaming, I don't really know, or this may possibly be the only way to watch this movie a certain way, because it was on the list of significant Laserdisc releases. But for those of you who have no interest in knowing anything about that, just know it's this giant disc, and I have something that plays it, and this is what the cover looks like on this cool thing. I mean, I actually kind of like Laserdiscs. I wish that the quality was better on them, because the kind of ritual of having something record player size, like a record size disc, a 12-inch format, and having these big booklets and stuff that come with it, and some of these come with a lot of extra sort of features. This one did not. Pretty interesting. I think it would be cool if there were better releases like that on DVD and Blu-ray, but maybe that's what the Criterion Collection is, and I haven't bought one of those yet. So there you go. That being said, what is this movie about? Okay? So I'm just literally going to read the back of this off, because while I think it gives an idea, it's not necessarily how this movie plays out. But it says, like all other worker drones in the sprawling subterranean technocracy, is that how, I mean, I know like the word technocratic, but whatever. He has no name, just a designation, THX 1138. He's the end result of a number-crunching, soul-numbing, perfection-obsessed society, but there's a fatal flaw. He's human and he wants out. And the main character in this one is played by Robert Duvall, but he also has like a roommate that's also his like mate, but not sexual, just roommate, that then ends up like when they... Anyway, I guess I'm not going to get into the plot yet, but regardless, Robert Duvall is in this. He actually does a good job playing some like weird, sedated guy that's like coming out, like figuring out how to have autonomy and stuff like that. I will say it's kind of funny because when you look at this picture, like I literally can't tell you if this is showing up correctly on the camera or not, but I hope it is because I'm not looking at the monitor. But this photo makes him look like he has like a giant head and like a weird body. And I don't know if that's what Robert Duvall actually looks like or if the costume in this movie made him look like that in a couple different scenes. But when I saw this, I was like, dang, the illustrator did this man a disservice. Then I watched the movie and I'm like, he does have a big head. Anyway, all right, so what's this movie about? I read you guys the back, but from actually watching this movie, I would say that, you know, it has like a weirder, it doesn't necessarily build that story for you very organically. You're kind of dropped into the situation where you see him working his job, you see other people working their job, you see the level of surveillance that's going on over this society. Everybody's taking tons of drugs, they're talking about programming, and they have like automaton police that go and find everybody that's not doing what they're supposed to do. And everything is super sterile, everybody wears these right outfits, everybody's kind of brainwashed on these medications, and they all just go to work, get their work done perfect and efficiently, and then go home and watch the state-sponsored programming, go to sleep, go back to work. Now, the problem is that our main characters have started fucking around with their drugs. And so they are starting to be less sedated. But in this universe, like multiple times, they call to these drugs as like they are the programming, right? Like you got to take all your pills so that you don't have a drug imbalance, so that you're sedated and ready to do what you need to do. Because if you don't, then your programming is off, meaning like you have a functioning brain and you start to think for yourself and you're like, wait, am I like a slave in this weird society? And anyway, that's what happens, right? So I honestly can't tell because I think it requires another watch. So let me get my first sort of feeling about this movie is that this was a movie, from what I understand, is based off of a short film or a short story that George Lucas wrote early in his career and then was adapted to this movie later on. By the way, executive producer on this movie, Francis Ford Coppola. Weird, because he's not on the box in any way, but when it goes to play in the movie, you see his name. But anyway, so what's my point in bringing up the short story nature of this? I think that this movie did a really good job of highlighting this like universe or this world building that George Lucas is good at, and created this technocracy that, you know, somebody, the viewer, could engage with and kind of be like, whoa, all this crazy stuff's going on. And there's really no holes in it as far as like, you know, they commit to the bit the whole movie with this society being this way. And that's almost one of the more interesting aspects of the movie, even if by this point in common media, we've been so scared of this outcome that we've seen a million renditions of this. But, you know, putting in context that this is an older movie and it didn't have that same catalog to draw upon, I think it was pretty interesting. The other piece of it, and the reason why I bring up the world building is like, it does a really good job of doing that, but almost sacrifices those initial 20 minutes of the movie where it lets you know what the hell is going on in the movie and who our characters are and stuff. It just says, screw that, like, we'll figure it out. You know this guy's the guy you're supposed to pay attention to, and let's move forward from there. And part of this could be that whenever I watch a Laserdisc, I'm like very hyper fixated on how it looks on my old TV. I have like an old Sony Bravia CRT, like rear projection situation that's playing these things off S-Video. And for those that just think I just said a bunch of random words, like some people out there know what I'm saying, but if you don't, it's okay. Basically, I'm watching it on an old TV to try to get the best sort of picture that's possible out of this thing. And that causes me not to pay attention as well, I think. But still, even that aside, I think that that's not my fault, and that's kind of this movie. But I guess just to do like a short synopsis of the plot, but not really spoil too much, they live in this crazy sterile world where they're all drugged to the point of just working and going home. And then either his roommate, who's a female, or himself and his roommate start messing with their drugs, and it's caused them to be less sedated, and they start like returning to humanity as far as like the way that brain functions and the way that they have feelings and things like that. And this causes them to essentially tap into their natural urges, and they have sex multiple times in this movie. Obviously it's not like it's like a movie sex scene or whatever, but they just kind of show up for a second, and they do a good job of making them seem super weird while they're doing it, which you would be if you just kind of like came into this weird like primal whatever. But the point of what's going on is like they are starting to have these feelings, and then they have love for each other through this, and that is not good for what's going on in the subterranean government, right? This whole society underground is built upon everybody being sedated and doing what they're supposed to do. And they're all being monitored 24/7, whether or not they know it. So it's like, for one thing, they knew that they were taking the wrong drugs, and they were able to figure it out. And then that drug imbalance, taking too little drugs, was called like an interval overdose or something like that. Basically, it meant like they were not sedated long enough to where they started to return to normal functioning and thinking, and that was a problem. So then they start trying to do these things like intervene with them, like having the girl switch to a different living situation or whatever, but that doesn't work, and they know they're having sex. And there's this whole thing about they're basically, the crime of them having free will and having sex is big enough that he's supposed to be, the guy is supposed to be killed. But instead, they're like, we're going to decommission him, or we're going to detain him. But this whole scene where they're figuring out what they're supposed to do with him, the prosecution is like, we need to get rid of these erotics. This is not a matter of religion. This is a matter of functioning society and efficiency and perfection. And like, these erotics are an abhorrent, blight on what we have going on and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, just interesting where, they literally see people that have organic sex because I'm guessing that the children that they have at this point in their, technology society is where, people don't have sex, and we just take the requirements for a baby and put them together in a lab and make it happen. So what happens is the woman gets pregnant, his roommate, and she's basically gone after that for the rest of the movie, which is kind of sad because they were supposed to run off together and kind of escape this. But before that could happen, he messed up at his job because he wasn't sedated, and then that's how they all kind of got caught for good. And then our main character, because he's been told he's going to be detained instead of killed, they drop him off in this essentially, 4 white walls room with a bunch of other weirdos, and there's seemingly no way out. So he's just supposed to stay there forever and rot. But then this hologram guy shows him the way out, and then he starts to escape. And there's this whole aspect where like the police that are supposed to be chasing after him have a budget for how much they're allowed to spend on finding him and getting him. And once the whole movie from that point on, they keep talking about how much of the budget they've consumed, because after they reach more than 5% of the budget, then the economics department says that there's no reason to go get this guy anymore. And so then the movie becomes like, is he gonna get away fast enough to outrun this budget, or is he gonna be able to outrun them anyway? Is there a place for him to be going? Like, what's happening with all what's happening with all this? How is he gonna escape? Whatever. So I'm not gonna spoil the literal ending. Just because, I'm sure you guys can kind of infer what happens by how movies go, but that's the movie, right? And so jumping into my review of this movie, I would just say that, to keep it short and simple on my first video back, interesting that it was made by George Lucas, has aspects of George Lucas's like really good like big brain world building where it's like he almost can't help himself from building out this whole universe of stuff going on. I say that as in I'm like thinking about Indiana Jones. Maybe there isn't that in Indiana Jones, but whatever. But like you could tell that this universe of this underground technocratic society has been built out, and that's very interesting. The schism of this version of like a technocratic dystopia is interesting because I don't think I've quite seen one just like this in any other media, especially with the whole like drugs being the programming, and like if you don't take your drugs then you're not you're not right in the head, and now we have to go arrest you and all this kind of stuff. Just like I thought that was super interesting. I think it's a super weird movie. So there you go. I think it was interesting. I just wish the plot was a little bit more coherent, and I wish that they had made me care about my main characters a little bit more in those first 20 minutes, so that when they're eventually sort of like figuring out that they like each other and that they're humans and they want to do human biological stuff, and then when they're later separated as she's pregnant, and then he finds out that she's really probably not ever gonna be able to reconnect with him or whatever, like all of those scenes would have a lot more weight if I really was like identifying with Robert Duvall's character in any way. But maybe I can't because I'm not some brainwashed guy that lives in a technocratic society, right? And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. So, the other thing to cross about this movie is that, to my knowledge, unless I'm just completely wrong about this, but to my knowledge, this is one of the only ways to watch it on the Laserdisc, and that's just completely inaccessible for a lot of people. So once I figure out how to rip my Laserdisc to a computer, I'd be happy to share the file with anybody. Don't come after me, Warner Bros. You're the ones that do not have a way to distribute this movie correctly or something like that. But regardless, that does make it quite the barrier of entry to actually for me to recommend this movie to you. But that doesn't affect the movie itself, so that doesn't really weigh into the review. It's just like something to note. So bottom line, out of 5, where are we putting THX 1138? I think that this movie, for people that are into like weird sci-fi movies, this movie definitely could give an easy light 3. I think it deserves a light 3. I think that if the stuff going on between the characters was a little bit more fleshed out so that I cared a little bit more, it could even tick up into a light 4, just because very little movies, especially from like certain time periods, have this level of interesting settings that are things that make you think about choices you make and society and all that kind of stuff. That being said, it didn't have those qualities, so it ranks in at, like, as far as building out the story a little bit more, so it ranks in at that light 3. But I think it's still a movie worth seeing, especially if you're into weird movies like this. Like any of my friends that like to watch weird B movies, this is something that you would want to see, and you could probably gain some sort of artistic, ooh, this is pretty cool, from some of these scenes. So with that being said, THX 1138 from the mind of George Lucas on Laserdisc gets a light 3 out of 5, and that is the review. So like I said, expect to see more videos soon. I appreciate everybody that has subscribed to me thus far. And if you made it to this point in the video, just comment down below if you're watching this. I know if you're watching on a TV, that makes it kind of difficult, but I would like to have comments in the comment section, because that makes it a little bit more interactive for me, selfishly. Good, bad, or indifferent. It gives me something to do once I post the video. So there you go. That's the review. I will catch you guys on the next one.